Hi, I'm Laura Stover, Director of HR Advisory Services. Thank you for watching this HR presentation as part of our 2023 governmental webinar. Today, I am going to be doing a brief employment law update and also talking about some tips for recruitment and retention. For those of you on the call I haven't met, my name again is Laura Stover, and I've been with the firm since 2011, so just a little over 12 years. And my role is to lead our HR advisory services niche and provide HR consulting services to clients throughout the firm. So let's get started with an employment law update. We're going to take a look at the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act, possible updates coming to FLSA, and also some expansion of protected classes under PHRC, Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was put into place just this June, and it applies to both public and private sector employers with at least 15 employees. And key provisions of the act which we're going to cover are accommodations and non-discrimination. Basically, the law says that an employer is required to provide a pregnant employee with a reasonable accommodations because of known temporary medical conditions that are related to the pregnancy or the childbirth. And this is different from current federal protections under disability law, where a pregnant employee would actually need to show that their medical condition rises to the definition of a disability. That isn't required under PWFA. You simply have to have a medical condition. And there is an undue hardship provision for employers. So if you can show that providing a reasonable accommodation is a significant difficulty or a significant expense to the employer, you may not then need to provide the reasonable accommodation. Some possible examples of reasonable accommodations are closer parking, flexible hours, maybe bigger uniforms or safety apparel, and possibly additional break time. For example, a pregnant employee may need a few more restroom breaks or to eat more often or to have a little bit more rest. The non-discrimination provisions of the law, as I mentioned, you have to provide a reasonable accommodation unless it is an undue hardship. You need to make sure that you're providing the accommodation that was agreed upon through the interactive process. And of course, you can't deny employment opportunities to someone who's qualified simply because they've requested an accommodation. You also cannot require an employee to take paid or unpaid leave where reasonable accommodation is available. For example, if someone just needs a couple more rest breaks but can still work, that would be a reasonable accommodation. And of course, you cannot take adverse action against any employee because they've requested a reasonable accommodation. So next steps for employers, you want to take a look at your accommodations policy, and if you don't have one, obviously get one in place and make sure that that includes the accommodations for pregnancy. You want to train your managers to recognize when this situation is in play, and they need to understand how to talk to an employee who has let them know that they are pregnant. Of course, if you're a larger organization, you can ask them to send the employee to human resources for that conversation. As an organization, you may want to consider what kind of accommodations you could make based on what you do in preparation in case you do have a pregnant employee. And the EEOC has said that they will issue regulations on this law within a year. So by the latest at June of next year, we should have clarification on the accommodation process and what are considered reasonable accommodations. The Pump Act for Nursing Mothers is another new law that went into effect in April. PUMP stands for Providing Urgent Maternal Protections. Basically, this applies to all employers covered by FLSA, so public employers, government agencies, schools are all covered by FLSA, and it expands the rights of nursing mothers to take breaks to express milk. So basically now all employees are covered, whether they're non-exempt or exempt, they have rights to these breaks. Now there is another undue hardship exception for small employers under 50 employees, but once again, that can be pretty hard to prove. Key provisions of this act are providing reasonable break time for up to 1 year for an employee who needs to express milk. The area where an employee does this has to be private. You cannot make them use a bathroom. It needs to be shielded from view and free from intrusions. And of course, it needs to be functional and have enough room for the employee to express breast milk. When you have an employee in this situation, it's probably a good idea to post a privacy type notice. And also don't forget that this would apply to teleworkers, not just those who are physically in the office. In terms of next steps, you want to review your existing practices to make sure you're in compliance, or if you've never had an employee that needs to express milk, making sure that you will be in compliance if that does happen. And you really want to consider whether or not you're going to pay these breaks. The EEOC is going to take a close look to see at what other types of breaks you provide and how you pay employees for those breaks, and make sure you're doing the same thing for an employee that needs to express milk. We certainly recommend paying the breaks, but you can have a conversation around how many breaks they need, how long are they going to be, but be very careful before you decide not to pay a break. You may want to consider putting a nursing mothers or breastfeeding breaks policy in your handbook. And again, train managers to make sure they know how to have these conversations, or if available, send the employee to human resources for the conversation. The Fair Labor Standards Act is obviously the big federal wage and hour law, and we've been expecting the DOL to increase the minimum salary threshold for exempt employees for quite some time now. The last update was supposed to be in May. We're still thinking it's going to happen, but we're not sure when. Just as a refresher, executive, administrative, and professional exemptions under FLSA, the minimum salary threshold is currently at $684 per week, which is a little over $35,000 annually. If an employee makes at least that and also meets the duties requirements of exemptions, then they could be exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So the expectation is that this minimum salary threshold is probably going to increase somewhere between $900 to $1,000 per week, which would be $46,800 to $52,000 annualized. And they may even put automatic increases in there. It's possible that some of this delay is due to them wanting to also work on the duties test and revise some of that. Again, we're not sure if that's going to happen, but you may want to start taking a look at your employees who make, around that $35,000 to $52,000 range. And if they're classified as exempt, consider whether you're going to be increasing their salary or changing them to hourly and having them eligible for overtime. Again, we're not sure when it's going to happen, but it is expected to happen at some point this year. The Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission has proposed new regulations to expand the definition of certain protected classes, and those include sex, race, and religious creed. As a reminder, the PHRC covers employers with 4 or more employees. And with regard to the sex protected category, they're really looking to focus on protections for the LGBTQ community. And if you may remember that under federal law, any employer with 15 or more employees already has protections for like sexual orientation and gender identity. And you can see on this list how they're looking to expand these categories. The PHRC still is accepting claims under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act for gender identity and sexual orientation. So this is more of just a clarification. With regard to race, they're looking at focusing on protecting cultural and ethnic traditions, and part of that is including protections for certain hairstyles that are related or associated with race, things like possibly dreadlocks. These are called crown acts, and a lot of other states have these. Maryland is one of them, so it's really just kind of getting updated in terms of the hairstyle protection. And with religious creed, they're including failure to provide a reasonable accommodation for religious observance or practice. Again, this isn't officially published in the PA Bulletin yet, but we're thinking these expansions are probably going to happen. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about tips for recruitment and retention. As you are aware, I'm sure we still have a labor shortage. If you look at statistics from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they say in the United States there's 75 workers for every 100 open jobs, And in Pennsylvania, there's 78 workers for every 100 open jobs. It looks like the labor force participation rate is increasing, which is a good thing. More people are coming into the economy. Inflation is forcing some of that, but at the same time, some employers are laying off due to inflation. So there's still a lot of that uncertainty and just a lack of people in the workforce. So that means you need to be a really good employer to get those people to look at you, to apply to your jobs, and to come to your organizations. And you really need to focus on being an employer of choice. And in order to do that, your hiring process is really important. You want an engaging hiring process, one that's fast, that's efficient, and you absolutely want to be responsive. You want to be taking a look at your organization's culture. Is it healthy? Do you have good benefits? Is there a career path? Are you, providing recognition for your employees? And what are you doing to strengthen your brand? What kind of conversations are you having? What stories are you telling? Are you highlighting your successes? Are you talking about how you serve the citizens of the community? That's all really important in becoming employer of choice. You do not want to be that person or that organization or company where people are like, oh my goodness, you don't want to work there. You want to be that employer of choice, the ones that people are knocking down your door to come work at. And it's important that you realize that recruitment is this ongoing thing. It requires focus, it requires strategy and planning, and it's something you should be talking about constantly in your organization for how you can recruit not only active candidates, but also passive candidates. I know Indeed is a great job board that everybody posts on, and you should be posting on Indeed, but you have to go beyond that. Possibly there's some niche job sites that you could post on. And you want to make sure you're taking a look at your job posting. Is it well written? It almost needs to be more of like a marketing posting these days, and focusing on how the employee is going to benefit from working for you. Make sure you're focusing on the purpose of your organization and what a day in the life looks like working there. You really want to make sure you're clear on how your organization will be a benefit for that employee working there. And of course, you want to be leveraging social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Social media will make things go viral. Lots of things are shared. And this is a great way not only to talk about job openings, but also all the great things about your organization and your culture. And you also want to look at your career site. I know smaller organizations struggle with this, but it's really off-putting when someone goes to your website and there's really nothing about careers on there. At a minimum, you should have a way to apply, even if it's just an email. Have some pictures, some stories about the organization, just something to give someone a feel about your organization. And, this is super important, especially to young people who are used to immediately going to the internet to find their information. Of course, building a student pipeline is important because it's very hard to find experienced people. So a lot of times you have to start at the beginning and build from within for succession planning. You should be on a first name basis with high school teachers, with college professors, with universities and tech schools to make sure that you understand the type of students that are available and that could come work for you. You want to be going to the classrooms and giving presentations. Internships are a great way to learn to see how students work and then to be able to hire them full time. So consider an internship program. Employee referral programs are also a great way to recruit people. If your employees are happy, they're going to want to refer people to your organization. So why not incentivize them to do that with possibly a bonus? You may also want to consider some resume subscriptions. For example, Indeed, you can subscribe to their resume database and you can go out there and see everybody that's posting their resume, and you can search for them and reach out to them about your opportunities. It's a great way to meet to get introduced to the more passive candidates. And of course, you want to make it real. So that means you have to be tracking all of your networking and your connections on your leads for jobs, right? It could take years to get someone to come work for you, and you're not going to remember everyone that you spoke with. So take the time to, even if it's just a spreadsheet, to build that spreadsheet that lists all your contacts and networking that you've done and can follow up on, every month or so that you're recruiting not just active but passive candidates as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about retention. Of course, company culture is super important to retention. You have got to have a positive culture to retain people. And when people feel valued and respected by leadership and management, that is going to go a long way in retaining people. So make sure that you are acknowledging people, that you're recognizing employees for their contributions, and that you have a fair workplace. That is going to go very far with your retention. And of course, you want to practice transparent communication. Employees need to know what's going on, the good, the bad, where the organization is headed. So be transparent and keep them involved in communications. Of course, you've got to provide training opportunities, development. A smaller organization, you might not have promotional opportunities, but that doesn't mean you can't provide opportunities to enhance skills or maybe take on additional responsibilities or projects. People are motivated. They want to be challenged. So make sure you're providing that opportunity. You also want to invest in technology so that you eliminate redundancies and people can focus on more meaningful work. Sometimes public employers, the knock on them is they're behind the times. They don't have the technology. And that can be a put off for applicants and employees. It can really cause job burnout, especially if you've brought someone in from an organization that has technology. So make sure you're leveraging that and using technology to its fullest. Another important consideration is focusing on your staff's health. Consider putting in an employee assistance program or wellness programs. The focus and management over the years has really focused on connecting and caring with employees, not just telling them what to do and controlling them every day, but really engaging and connecting with them. That is really important, especially with the younger generation. Of course, you want to ensure you have a good onboarding process. There's nothing worse than starting a job and you feel like you're not even welcome and nothing's ready for you. So make sure you have all the tools necessary and assign a buddy to the person, someone that they can go to and bug and not feel like they're bothering with all those questions that new hires have. Promoting a work-life balance is important, whether it's through flexible scheduling, generous paid time off, or allowing hybrid or remote work. These are all things that, depending on the person, could really help with retention if you're able to give that flexibility. And of course, as I've mentioned in past presentations, stay interviews are a great way to kind of get a feel for how things are going in your organization. Don't wait till an exit interview and someone's already out the door. Sit down with your current good employees and have a conversation about, hey, what's working well? What do you like about it here? And what can we get better at? But only do that if you're willing to take action on that information. Because if you hear everything and then do nothing, that will only make things worse. So make sure you're prepared to take action on anything that you may hear. So in summary, recruitment and retention, it takes a dedication and a focus and a real commitment from the management team to reward and value and respect employees. What your employees bring to work is the single most important component of your organization's success. Happy employees are motivated employees. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make them have an enjoyable work experience and be as flexible as possible and promote work-life balance so that they are also happy in their personal lives. So thank you for watching and listening to this. If you have any questions on any of the employment laws, on recruitment, retention, or anything HR, please feel free to reach out to me at the contact information listed on the screen. I'd be happy to have a conversation or respond to your email. Thanks again for watching.
Okay. Now, Laura did have a couple of updates right after she recorded the video. She heard that the expanded definitions of protected classes that she discussed will go into effect on August 16th of this year. And with regards to the minimum salary threshold update for exempt employees, the Department of Labor has announced that this new rule will be issued in August of 2023. And this is the fourth time that the rule has been delayed.